I still remember the heat of anticipation prickling my skin the moment I decided to follow her. There was a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach, a sense that something was terribly off. My hand trembled around my phone as I dialed her number, fully prepared to hear the buzz of an office or some hushed meeting atmosphere on the other end. Instead, a mellow string of music drifted faintly across the line, chimes, water fountains, possibly even meditative chants. In that split second, my entire world cracked. She claimed she had a work emergency, yet her bank statement showed a spa retreat. From that day forward, my life was never the same. I guess I need to rewind a bit, or else the story won't make as much sense as it does in my own head. My name is Adrian, and I've always prided myself on being rational, loyal, and honest. Maybe that's how I was raised. My mother taught me early on that to build a good, stable life, you needed to respect the people you cared about and communicate honestly, even when it hurt. Unfortunately, that advice isn't always followed by those around us. For me, the seeds of suspicion were planted by small inconsistencies. I'm not usually the paranoid type. In fact, I'm the person who can watch psychological thrillers and still believe in the goodness of humanity. But in the weeks leading up to that fateful revelation, the love of my life, Jennifer, had been increasingly distant. She would wave off dinner plans with vague explanations like, "Oh, sorry, an urgent project popped up," or "I have to grab some files from the office." And while it was mildly annoying, I figured it was just the cost of loving someone so dedicated to her career. We'd been together for over 5 years. We met through mutual friends at a New Year's Eve party, and to me, she was the embodiment of everything I admired: sharp intellect, grace, unwavering ambition, and a quiet resilience that made me fall for her. She was the one who always had an answer for every question, a plan for every twist in life, and a steady, unwavering approach to the future. Over the course of half a decade, we built a life that felt solid and dependable, like bedrock beneath my feet. In the last month or so, though, the distance between us had transformed from a slight crack into a looming canyon. At first, the only sign was the occasional cancelled date. Then it was her phone calls. Late at night, after we'd had dinner at home, she would suddenly excuse herself and take a call in the hallway. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of tension in her eyes as she pressed the phone to her ear, murmuring in a quiet, guarded voice. When I asked, she'd just say, "It's a colleague," or "It's late, but we have a new project. Don't worry." Of course, at the time, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. The rational side of me had no reason to suspect anything nefarious was going on. She had always been honest with me before, or at least that's what I believed. But even someone as logically inclined as I am can sense when something is amiss. Sometimes the heart just knows, even before the mind catches up. One Friday evening, we had plans to go out with some friends. I was getting ready at home, throwing on a semi-casual outfit since the plan was to check out a new lounge downtown, when I got a text from her: "Emergency at work. So sorry, won't make it tonight. Rain check." The message was abrupt, lacking any warmth or further explanation. Immediately, my mind reeled with questions. I'd known she was busy, but an outright crisis on a Friday night, just minutes before we were supposed to leave? I tried to push away my doubts, telling myself that it was entirely possible. People in her field get called away unexpectedly. But as the hours ticked on and she still hadn't returned my calls, a gnawing sense of anxiety took hold of me. My imagination ran wild with possibilities. Maybe she truly was stuck at the office under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, stressed out and frantic over some big deadline. Or maybe something else was going on. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed felt cold and empty, even though the summer air outside was balmy. My thoughts spiraled around the idea that I might be losing her without realizing it. It's funny how fear can cling to the recesses of your mind, whispering worst-case scenarios into your ear when you're the most vulnerable. Early the next morning, I decided to go for a jog to clear my head. Our neighborhood is fairly peaceful: tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors walking their dogs, the occasional squeak of bicycle wheels on pavement. I thought the rhythm of my footsteps on the sidewalk would calm me, but all it did was pulse in tandem with the roiling confusion inside. Over and over, my brain repeated questions. Why was she so distant? Why had she cancelled at the last minute? Why couldn't she have given me a call to at least let me know she was safe? When I got home, I found her seated at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. She gave me a fleeting smile. "Morning," she said, "sorry about last night. Work emergency." It was a simple explanation, void of detail. Before I could prod for more, she added, "We can talk about it later, okay? I'm exhausted." A wave of relief washed over me that she was home and safe, but I also felt frustrated. I wanted to be part of her life, to know what was stressing her out, to offer support. Still, I told myself to be patient. Maybe she really did need time to decompress. The next couple of days were rocky. She would disappear for long stretches, claiming she had to meet a co-worker or finalize some tasks at the office. Our normally fluid conversation felt stilted. I no longer recognized the easy rhythm we once had. Instead, it felt like we were in a dance where she was perpetually stepping on my toes. Our once warm, intimate nights became marked by short, monosyllabic chats and an almost dismissive goodnight kiss, if she was even home to give one. Then came the turning point. It was midweek, and I was balancing my laptop on my knees, going through a monthly budget spreadsheet, when I realized we had to pay a few upcoming bills. Normally, we share our expenses. We're not married, but we'd decided early on that transparency with money was crucial. There was a mutual trust that allowed either of us to handle the finances, as we had both agreed to keep each other in the loop. I was logging into our joint account to make sure we had enough to cover everything when I noticed a transaction that jumped out at me. It was a charge for a spa retreat, an expensive one, hundreds of dollars, dated the very day she had texted me about an urgent work emergency. My heart pounded so loudly that I could swear it drowned out the hum of the air conditioner. All my suspicions, all my half-formed anxieties, suddenly roared to life. Maybe there was an explanation, I told myself. Maybe her coworker had some bizarre scheme to hold a meeting at the spa, or she purchased a gift for someone. But the rational side of my brain fought back with an onslaught of questions. Why would that line item not come with a note? Why did it match exactly the day she had cancelled our plans? Adrenaline coursed through me. I debated for what felt like an eternity whether or not to confront her right away. My immediate reaction was a tangled knot of betrayal, hurt, anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Finally, I settled on giving myself a day to think it through, to calm down enough that I could speak rationally instead of exploding with accusations. But before I had a chance to gather my thoughts, fate intervened. That same evening, she told me she'd be heading out again for an important conference call with a client. I remember the moment distinctly. She was tying her hair into a neat bun, slipping on a professional-looking blazer, picking up her laptop bag. She even gave me a contrived sigh, as though bracing herself for another grueling work session. Part of me marveled at how convincing she was. Another part of me wanted to tear off the mask she seemed to be wearing. The second she was out the door, I grabbed my keys, determination surging through my veins like a live wire. Enough was enough. I needed the truth. The spa location was printed on the bank statement. Maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth tonight, and I'd find a quiet building with the lights off, nobody around. Then I could blame my paranoia on a day of stress. Or perhaps I'd find something else entirely. The drive to the spa was a blur of city lights and unanswered questions. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles turned white. I tried to calm myself by reasoning that it could all be a misunderstanding. But I'm honest enough to admit that, deep down, I suspected otherwise. It was a rather upscale wellness center, the kind of place with a fountain in front, softly illuminated signage, and a lush, landscaped entrance. I parked a little ways off, not wanting to draw attention to myself. My heart hammered in my chest as I approached, scanning the cars in the lot. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I recognized her car. My palms turned clammy. My suspicions were confirmed before I even stepped inside. I lingered by the entrance, wrestling with indecision. Confront her here? Cause a scene at a spa? It felt dramatic and invasive. But it also felt like the only way to truly confirm my suspicions. Just as I was about to turn back, a ripple of noise drifted my way, a distant melody of trickling water and hushed conversation. Then, a door opened. She emerged from a side hallway, wearing a plush robe and slippers, her hair loosely falling around her shoulders. Immediately, I noticed the content, almost blissful look on her face, as if she had stepped out of a dream. Then she saw me. The color drained from her cheeks in an instant, replaced by something akin to shock and guilt. "Adrian," she managed to croak, hugging the robe tighter around her body. The next few minutes were a blur of strained whispering and startled patrons glancing our way. We kept our voices down, though everything inside me wanted to shout, to demand answers right there in the lobby. After a few seconds of tense silence, she gestured for me to follow her out to a quieter corner near the courtyard. All the words I'd rehearsed during the drive over twisted into a tangled mess in my throat. I started with, "You said you had a work emergency. Why are you here?" She stuttered, her eyes flitting around like a trapped animal. I expected her to craft some elaborate lie, maybe an alibi about meeting a client at the spa. Instead, she sputtered about how she needed time to decompress, how she was overwhelmed, how everything was so stressful, and how she felt like she couldn't talk to me about it because she didn't want to worry me. My chest tightened in anger and hurt. "So you lied to me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I've been worried sick, thinking you're buried under deadlines or dealing with some crisis at work, and you're out here pampering yourself." She tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. A fleeting look of pain crossed her face, then she added, "I didn't know how else to handle this. My job is suffocating me, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I just needed an escape." A swirl of conflicting emotions overwhelmed me: empathy for her stress, anger at her lies, sadness over the betrayal, and confusion about what this meant for our future. All I could do in that moment was stare at the woman I loved, unsure if I even recognized her anymore. Eventually, she reached for my shoulder and quietly said, "Please, can we talk about this at home?" I nodded, numb, unsure of what else to do. We left in separate cars. That drive back was one of the longest I'd ever experienced, even though it took only 20 minutes. My mind reeled with hypotheticals. Was this the first time she'd done this? Had she lied about other things? Did she really not trust me enough to confide in me? By the time I pulled into our driveway, she was already there, sitting on the porch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The spa robe was gone, replaced by the blazer she'd worn earlier, but the incongruity of it all felt like whiplash. She glanced up with tearful eyes, and that raw expression twisted a knife in my heart. Even then, I still loved her fiercely. We sat on the porch for what felt like hours. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Our conversation was full of broken starts and halting confessions. She spoke of the immense pressure she'd been under at work, the sense that she had to always be the perfect partner who never crumbled, never let me see her weaknesses. She said she'd begun to resent feeling like she was always the strong one, that she didn't know how to break out of that role. I listened, trying to keep my own hurt from drowning out her words. I couldn't ignore the betrayal, but I also couldn't pretend I didn't see her anguish. The woman before me was not the same confident person who used to stride through life. She seemed fragile, uncertain, like a person who had lost her footing. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in any longer. My voice trembled as I asked, "If you felt you couldn't tell me about your struggles, doesn't that say something's broken between us? We were supposed to be a team." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I hated how vulnerable I felt, but it was the truth. She placed her hand over mine, this time with more firmness, and spoke through her own tears, "I know I messed up. I was scared. Sometimes it feels like if I admit I'm not handling things, everything will collapse. You'll lose respect for me. I didn't want to appear weak in front of you." Hearing those words stung. I wanted to reassure her that I would never see her as weak, but the pain of her deception had lodged in my chest, refusing to let me speak freely. Still, I had to let her know how I felt. "I'm not disappointed in you for needing time off, for wanting to distress," I said quietly. "I'm hurt that you lied, that you shut me out. And if this is how you handle pressure, by deceiving me, I don't know how we can move forward." For a moment, our gaze locked. I saw fear in her eyes, fear of losing me. And I felt my own fear bubbling up, fear of giving my heart to someone who might choose deception over honesty again. We had reached a crossroads, where our relationship could either crumble under the weight of this betrayal or grow stronger if we found a way to navigate it together. She swallowed hard and asked, "Is there a chance you can forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I suggested we move inside, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the oppressive summer heat. As we walked through the living room, the silence was almost palpable. The place we once called home now felt charged with unresolved tension. In the dim light of the lamp, with the air conditioner's hum filling the background, we finally had the kind of raw, open conversation we should have had weeks or months ago. She admitted to multiple instances of calling in work emergencies, but actually going to different retreats or taking personal days. It started with just one time when she desperately needed a break and didn't want to ask for time off. She said it became a habit because, after the first lie, it was easier to keep lying than to face the truth. The more she did it, the more entangled she felt, and the guilt of lying to me only added to her stress. Listening to her confession, I felt a tumult of emotions. A part of me wanted to scream that she had no right to keep me in the dark, that I was her partner and deserved honesty. Another part of me ached for the lonely, pressured woman she described being. Still, I couldn't ignore the fundamental breach of trust. Eventually, I told her, "I can't promise I'll forgive you overnight. But if you're willing to get professional help, counseling, therapy, whatever you need, and if you're willing to rebuild trust one step at a time, maybe we can figure this out." Her eyes welled with tears again, and she nodded fervently, as though I'd thrown her a lifeline. She reached out to hold me, and for a moment, I allowed it, feeling her warmth against my chest, her heartbeat fluttering in tandem with mine. But I also felt a new distance between us, something intangible yet profoundly real. I realized that night that trust, once broken, is like a shattered mirror. Even if you piece it back together, the cracks remain visible. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotional confrontations, apologies, and attempts at open communication. I appreciated her efforts to be transparent. She started telling me about her therapy sessions, her day-to-day anxieties, and even let me know ahead of time if she was feeling too overwhelmed. She spent time proving that she was at the office when she said she would be, going so far as to share her schedule with me. Though it felt slightly invasive for both of us, it was her idea, an attempt to re-establish trust. Meanwhile, I grappled with my own feelings of betrayal and anger. Every time she left the house, part of me worried she was going somewhere else, lying once more. We decided to seek couples therapy. It was a difficult step for me because I'd always believed we were the rock-solid couple people admired. The notion that we needed outside help felt like admitting defeat. But I realized that if we wanted any chance of mending our relationship, we had to be vulnerable enough to ask for help. Our counselor was a calm, empathetic professional who facilitated a safe space where we could unpack not just the lie about the spa retreat, but the underlying issues that led her to feel she couldn't be honest. Through these sessions, I came to learn about her deep-seated fears: fear of not living up to expectations at work, fear of losing the image of being the strong, unbreakable partner, fear of disappointing her parents, who'd always expected her to excel. I started to see that her spa visits and breaks weren't just frivolous escapes, they were desperate attempts to preserve some sense of control in a life she felt was spiraling. Even so, acknowledging her internal battles didn't magically erase the hurt I felt. Healing is a process. We had arguments, big, emotional blowouts, where I yelled things like, "How can I trust you if you don't trust me enough to share your problems?" She would cry and respond, "I do trust you, I'm just scared of letting you see me fail." Over time, these arguments began to subside into more productive discussions, but the process was anything but smooth. Throughout it all, I remained steadfast in my need for honesty. I told her plainly that any future lies, no matter how small, would be a deal-breaker. She teetered on the edge of panic whenever I mentioned that possibility, and I felt guilty for constantly reminding her. But what could I do? We were trying to mend a fractured bond, and honesty was the glue. Without it, we'd both crumble. Months passed, and slowly, a new routine emerged. She cut down her hours at work, learned to delegate some responsibilities, and even took legitimate personal days with the blessing of her boss. I noticed that she began to smile more often, less forced and more genuine. Meanwhile, I worked on my own emotional scars. I practiced not checking up on her every move, resisting the urge to cling to her schedule for reassurance. This was, of course, a monumental task. There were moments when my imagination would run wild, picturing her sneaking off again to some luxury spa under the guise of a meeting. But each time those thoughts arose, I tried to communicate them honestly to her and to our therapist. One morning, I woke up to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the early light. She turned to me and whispered, "I had a nightmare about losing you." I reached out to touch her arm, and for a moment, I felt a kind of closeness that we hadn't shared in a long time. In that small moment, I saw a woman who genuinely regretted what she had done and was fighting to hold on to us. We embraced, letting the morning sun wash over our tangled sheets, and I felt, maybe for the first time since everything fell apart, some semblance of hope. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. The memory of finding her at that spa haunted me. Sometimes I'd dream about it, me stepping into a softly lit lobby, hearing the trickle of water, my chest tightening, and then I'd see her in the distance, looking happy and carefree, completely detached from me. I'd wake up covered in sweat, my breath ragged, feeling the phantom sting of betrayal all over again. Recovery from that kind of betrayal is not linear. Yet, as the weeks turned into months, I began to see changes that felt permanent and sincere. She was more open, not just with me, but with her friends and co-workers as well. She'd talk about her struggles in therapy, about setting boundaries with work. She admitted that she wished she had the courage to talk to me sooner, but at least now, she was trying to break the cycle of dishonesty. I, too, had to reevaluate how I contributed to the dynamic. Had I unintentionally put her on a pedestal, making her feel she couldn't show vulnerability? Had I brushed aside her stress signals because I assumed she could handle everything? My introspection led me to think more deeply about the roles we cast for each other in our relationship. Our therapist helped us identify these patterns, and slowly, we began to rewrite our narrative. We implemented check-in nights, where we'd spend an hour discussing our mental and emotional states. Sometimes these nights were intimate and comforting, other times, they devolved into tears or heated arguments. But the act of consistently sharing, of intentionally dedicating time to our emotional well-being, was transformative. It offered a structured way to air grievances, celebrate small victories, and reaffirm our commitment to staying honest. There was a pivotal moment, around 6 months after the incident, when she came home from a particularly stressful day at work, tears brimming in her eyes. Without any preamble, she said, "I need a break. A real break. There's a new spa package my friend recommended, and I want to go, but I want to go with you. Because I don't want to hide anymore." My initial reaction was mixed. Part of me was relieved she wanted my company, another part was triggered by the memory of how this all began. But as she stood there, raw and vulnerable, I realized she was extending an olive branch. She was showing me that she intended to do things differently. I mustered a gentle smile and replied, "I'd like that." So we went together. At first, it felt awkward, stepping into the spa lobby that reminded me so much of that terrible night. But this time, we walked in hand, forging a new memory. We had massages side by side, took a guided meditation session, and soaked in a jacuzzi under soft, ambient lights. I watched her face transform from tense and anxious to calm and content, and I felt something inside me heal just a little bit more. Over dinner afterward, she asked how I felt, and for once, I didn't hold back. I told her I still felt pangs of insecurity sometimes, that I still worried she might revert to old habits. She listened patiently and then reassured me that she was trying her best to break the cycle of deceit. We ended the night feeling closer than we had in a long while. And yet, even a successful spa day doesn't mean everything is magically fixed. The aftermath of betrayal lingers like a faint bruise, tender to the touch. But each honest conversation, each shared moment of vulnerability, forms a new layer of trust. Our relationship is, in many ways, on probation. We're learning how to communicate better, how to handle stress without shutting each other out or resorting to half-truths. Sometimes, late at night, I'll lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, recalling the shock of seeing that bank statement and the confrontation in the spa lobby. It still makes my chest feel tight. But I can also reflect on how far we've come since then. We're not perfect, and perhaps we never will be, but we're learning to accept each other's flaws. I suppose the scariest part is not knowing whether this process will lead us to a deeper, more resilient love or merely delay an inevitable collapse. But every morning, when I wake up and see her next to me, I choose to believe in the possibility of redemption and growth. I choose to believe that honesty, once lost, can be painstakingly regained. And so far, that belief has carried us through the darkest patches. I won't lie, part of me remains guarded. I've learned the hard way that even those we love most can hurt us. But I also see the capacity for change in her, and I see it in myself. Love isn't just about the good days, after all. It's about weathering the worst storms and emerging, battered but still holding onto something worth fighting for. Looking back, do I wish she'd never lied about the work emergency? Of course. Do I wish I'd confronted her sooner, insisted we talk about her stress before it built up to that critical point? Absolutely. But life isn't neat. We make mistakes, we hide parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, and sometimes we break the hearts of the people we care about most. The real question is whether we can own up to that pain, learn from it, and build something stronger in its wake. So here I am, still trying, day by day, to restore what was lost. Some mornings, she'll leave the house for an early meeting, and I'll feel a pang in my chest, an echo of the old suspicion. That's when I take a deep breath and remind myself, we're working on this together. And by the time she comes home, usually with a tired but genuine smile on her face, we share a kiss, and for a little while, I can forget about the spa retreat that tore a hole in our relationship. Maybe that's enough for now. Sure, I miss the days when trust wasn't a fragile thing we had to rebuild from scratch. But I also recognize that love isn't static. It's shaped by trials, crises, and the willingness to see each other's flaws without turning away. If we can weather this, if we can truly confront our fears and learn to speak our truths, then maybe we'll come out the other side even closer than before. In the quiet moments of reflection, I realize how much I've grown from this ordeal. I've learned that my own expectations can be a prison for someone else if I'm not careful. I've learned that trust is more than just an unspoken agreement, it's a living, breathing entity that needs constant nourishment. And most of all, I've learned that love doesn't always look like a fairy tale. It can be messy, raw, and real, requiring both people to choose each other again and again, even when it would be easier to walk away. To this day, I can't say for certain that we've fully recovered. But I can say that we're committed to trying, to having the hard conversations, to digging into the uncomfortable truths of who we are and what we need. Sometimes I wonder if that single transaction on the bank statement was a blessing in disguise, a painful jolt that forced us to confront issues that had been simmering under the surface. In the end, maybe that's what love really is, a complex dance of vulnerability, forgiveness, and a desire to keep going when everything seems lost. And if this story of an exposed spa retreat can lead us to a more transparent, more compassionate partnership, then perhaps our pain hasn't been in vain. Maybe this is the test that we needed to figure out if we can truly grow together, instead of drifting apart. I choose to believe that we can, and that belief, tenuous and hopeful, is what keeps me here, still fighting for us.